What would the championship table look like if we were to base it on each club's net spend over the last 5 seasons? Let's take a look. Guys, welcome back to another video on the channel. I've gone ahead and crunched the numbers, and I think this one comes back with some interesting readings. So net spend is a decent way to figure out how profitable each championship football club has been since the 18/19 season. Those are the numbers that I will be taking into consideration here. Now, for the sake of today's video, we are only going to be taking into consideration transfer fees spent and received for players. So we're not going to be taking into consideration any money that's been spent on wages, infrastructure, or anything like that. Just transfer fees. And this one gives us an interesting indication of who's been profitable over the last few years and who's lost a hell of a lot of money. As always, if you do go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like. But without any further ado, let's jump in. And starting out at the bottom of the pile with by far and away the biggest loss, we have Sheffield United coming in with net spend of minus €103 million. By far and away the biggest loss that we've got in today's video in terms of transfer fees spent versus money that was brought in. The two big seasons that Sheffield United went quite big for in terms of those transfer fees being spent were, of course, those 2 seasons in the Premier League, and I think that on reflection of those years and the recruitment in those 2 seasons, I think it's fair to say that there were more misses than hits during their transfer dealings around about that time, and quite a few overinflated price tags which they probably regret now. They did make a little bit of that money back during their first season back down in the Championship, but nowhere near enough to cover what they actually spent in those 2 Premier League years. Coming in 23rd place, we then have Cardiff City coming in with a minus €35.9 million net spend. Obviously, the thing that I think becomes quite clear early on is a lot of those teams with those big minuses come from a year or 2 in the Premier League, and that's where this big negative really comes from Cardiff in this one. Their biggest negligible factor in terms of their net spend did come in the 18/19 season when they rolled the dice on some transfer fees. Ultimately, they were relegated that season, and that big spending didn't pay off for them. Coming in 22nd place, we then have Stoke City coming in with a minus €27 million net spend. Now, each of the 5 seasons for Stoke that have been taken into account here were all actually in the Championship, which really speaks to the fact of how much money they've gone ahead and wasted over these last 5 years in the Championship. Started to slowly turn the corner in terms of they brought more money in than they lost with transfer fees last season, but the real big losses for Stoke came during their first couple of seasons down at this level, where they seriously mismanaged the finances and recruitment side of things. Coming in 21st place, we then have Reading coming in with a minus €4.4 million net spend. Obviously, Reading have been massively hampered by their reckless financial situation over the last few years and have been subsequently put under an embargo, slowly turning things around when it comes to this side of things. Their biggest loss came in the 19/20 season in terms of expenditures versus what they brought in. Coming in 20th place, we then have Millwall coming in with a minus net spend of €1.6 million. We are starting to get into that phase now where these figures are by no means disastrous, and Millwall have been tiptoeing along the sort of positive and negative line in each of those 5 seasons in the Championship. But this probably speaks to the fact that Millwall haven't had that massive saleable asset over those last 5 years like some of the other Championship clubs who are yet to come on this list have. Coming in 19th place, we then have Blackburn Rovers coming in with a negative €570k net spend. Blackburn have actually spent quite a bit of money on this side over the last 5 years that they've had in the Championship. The biggest negating factor from some of those finances, though, was the sale of Adam Armstrong, which brought in a huge chunk of money for this Rovers squad and practically got them to around about even in terms of what they've spent versus what they brought in. Obviously, they've had some other sales in that time as well. Next then we have Blackpool coming in with a negative €46k net spend. This one quite negligible really in terms of the overall expenditure. I mean, this is nothing at all, and from what I can tell, Blackpool were pretty much exclusively working with free transfers between sort of 18/19 and 20/21, so there aren't really many figures that are bandied about from that year, but from their last 2 seasons in the Championship, they're pretty much even in terms of what they've spent versus brought in. Coming in 17th place, we have the first positive of today's video, Wigan, who have had a positive net spend of €1.6 million over the last 5 seasons. Now, Wigan's numbers are massively skewed because of the fact that they went into administration and had to have that fire sale of players just a few years ago. In the end, they got nowhere near value for money in terms of some of those sales that had to go through in the end that season, but overall the number comes to 1.6 million up for Wigan over these last 5 years because of those sales. Coming in 16th place, we then have my team Preston North End coming in with a positive 3.2 million net spend. Preston haven't really ever been the biggest spenders in the Championship, but year upon year we've had quite a hit and miss ratio in terms of those players who we have afforded those big transfer fees for. Obviously, we have brought in money for the likes of, Greg Cunningham leaving originally, Callum Robinson, Jordan Hugill, and of that money that was reinvested, yeah, a little bit hit and miss really. In at West Brom, there has been a fair amount of money that has been spent over the last 5 years, but it has been pretty much covered up by player sales. Their biggest loss came during their Premier League season in the 20/21 campaign, where they did roll the dice somewhat in terms of allowing for a little bit more expenditures on those transfer fees, but in the end they return for a positive €4.24 million. Next then, and in 14th place, we have Rotherham coming in with a positive 4.3 million net spend over the last 5 seasons. Rotherham, who pretty consistently year upon year have been making profits in terms of player sales, and they've gone ahead and reinvested the margin of that money back into the playing squad, and I suppose that speaks to the great job they've done to remain competitive this season especially. After that, in 13th place, we have Coventry City coming in with a positive 5.3 million net spend over the last 5 seasons. Interestingly enough, their biggest profits actually came during the 19/20 season, the year in which they were promoted from League One as champions. They recruited transfer fees that year for the likes of Connor Chaplin, Tom Bayliss and Sam McKellen, which all contributed towards this positive figure. And fair play to Burnley for this one. As many years as they spent in the Premier League, they're coming in with a positive net spend of 6.4 million over these last 5 seasons. Now, large chunks of what they had lost on transfer fees were really made up during this summer transfer window, but if we consider how competitive the squad that they've actually gone ahead and built, the fact that they built that on a massive transfer profit in terms of the fees they brought in for some of those big assets that left at the end of that Premier League year, yeah, Burnley have always been quite savvy, and they've had to be really with their recruitment strategy due to them not really being a big fish in the Premier League pond, but yeah, they're doing it well at the moment, it has to be said. Into 11th place we go. We then have Luton Town coming in with a positive net spend of €7.7 million over these last 5 seasons. Luton, a team who do it better than most at this level. They really have nailed their recruitment strategy to carry on building a competitive squad year upon year, remain in profit, and the fact they've not really allowed their wage bill to balloon during these last few years in the Championship as well is a real testament to how well they've managed things behind the scenes. Popping up in 10th place, we then have Sunderland coming in with a positive net spend of €17 million over these last 5 seasons. Sunderland, who have been really quite hit and miss, I think it's fair to say, with their recruitment over those 5 years, but a large chunk of that money was recruited in the 18/19 season. They'd had quite a few players who were out on loan the season before who were then sold in this season, which counts towards that year's books. Also, the fact that they had the Josh Maja sale go through in that year as well also massively bumps up those figures. Coming in 9th place, we then have Norwich City coming in with a positive net spend of plus €19 million over these last 5 seasons, in which they've really gone ahead and yo-yo between the Championship and Premier League. And it's interesting looking at their accounts actually. They have that loss going into the Premier League in terms of spending a little bit of money trying to be competitive, ultimately not doing enough, and then make that money back when they are down in the Championship. But overall, those last 5 years have contributed towards a plus 19 million for Norwich in their transfer fees. Huddersfield Town are 8th on the list with a plus €21 million profit on transfer fees over these last 5 years. The biggest year they took a hit was in that 18/19 season in the Premier League, and since that year it's been pretty much profit year upon year in terms of trying to shift on some of those big earners from the Premier League era off the wage bill. Has taken them quite a bit of time to go ahead and do it, but they've got there in the end. Also in that time, some other saleable assets that have gone, like Carlin Grant, Lewis O'Brien and Harry Toffolo, to name a couple more. In 7th place we then have QPR coming in with a plus €22 million net spend. For QPR of these last 5 seasons, it's pretty much been profit year upon year. Gone are the days where QPR were really quite reckless with their spending. You know, those few years they had in the Premier League where they just went absolutely bonkers in terms of their recruitment strategy. And they have had some really big sales over these last 5 seasons. You know, the likes of Aberieze, Brightside, Samuel, to name a few. Coming in 6th place, we then have Hull City. Into the playoff spots we go, coming in with a plus €24 million net spend over these last 5 seasons. The biggest sale that went through in that time was the Jarrod Bowen deal. Jarrod Bowen, Hull City to West Ham, which massively goes ahead and inflates these numbers, but they did make quite a chunk of profit over the summer as well, considering the sale of Keane Lewis Potter. Next up then, and in 5th place, we have Birmingham City coming in with a positive €29 million for their net spend over the last 5 years. Birmingham, a club who have been a little bit lackadaisical with their finances over the years, but they are coming in with a massive net positive here, primarily due to that massive sale of Jude Bellingham a couple of years ago. I think in the end they got around about €25 million for him, I want to say, and have slowly been getting things back on track when it comes to their recruitment. Obviously a few of the big earners that they've invested in the years gone by just haven't worked out in terms of that previous recruitment strategy, but yeah, massively up Birmingham, mostly because of that Bellingham deal. Coming in 4th place, we then have Bristol City coming in with a positive €37 million for their net spend over the last 5 seasons. Some massive profits have been made by Bristol City, 2 of their biggest profits coming in 18-19 and 19/20. Bristol City generally a really good club in terms of investing in players at the right time, building them up and selling them on for a massively inflated price. Have been really good at doing that over the years, and their net spend and their positive gain in that regard reflects upon that. Coming in 3rd place, we then have Middlesbrough coming in with a plus £41 million profit when it comes to their net spend. Another club, you know, quite similar to Birmingham, who haven't exactly nailed their recruitment strategy, you know, by any means over these last 5 years, but they've just had some absolutely huge saleable assets going out throughout the door throughout these last 5 years. Massive profits made in the 18/19 season thanks to sales for the likes of Patrick Bamford, who went for about 10 million, Ben Gibson for 15, and Adama Traore for 18. Also made a profit in the most recent transfer window as well, due to the sale of Jed Spence to Spurs. Coming in 2nd place, we then have Watford coming in with massive profits of over €80 million across these last 5 seasons. Their biggest profits coming in this most recent transfer window and in the 20/21 season, where quite a lot of sales went on of players who were present at the club throughout their era in the Premier League. You know, going back to that 20/21 season and all the players that left in that transfer window. You had the likes of Gerard Deulofeu, Etienne Capoue, Luis Suarez, Pereira, Estupinan, Decore, all bringing in massive transfer fees this summer. You know, Emmanuel Dennis going out of note, and all those players combined have contributed towards this massive fee. But coming in at the top of the tree with huge profits of over €100 million based on their transfer fees over the last 5 seasons, we have Swansea City. Now, plenty of these profits came during the 18/19 and 19/20 seasons, when they were selling off some of those more saleable assets from the sort of Premier League era. You know, thinking back to that 19/20 season, sold players like Ollie McBurney, Jordan Ayew, Dan James, amongst others, to bring in some really big profits. And Swansea quite consistently, year upon year, have really had that big saleable asset to go out through the door, and as a result of that, they've managed to bolster these massive profits over recent years, and bigger than any other Championship club. But guys, there we have it. I thought that one was quite interesting. As you can see to the side of me, that is the Championship net spend table based on the last 5 seasons of football. I think it makes for quite interesting reading. But as always guys, thank you very much for tuning in. If you did go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like and do stick around and subscribe for some regular Championship content. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you all in the next one.